Hello, and welcome back to our series where we are building a people and culture management system. This series is brought to you by Prairie HR Solutions. My name is Jake Finger, Principal Consultant here at Prairie HR Solutions. And I want to pick up where we left off our last video. And I received an email asking if I could go in depth on how to do the logic here. Essentially, the function that I've written took the hours, figured out the premium, and then the pay. So it was the hourly rate times the premium, and then the product of that times the hours worked, and then that equaled the pay. And particularly, they wanted to know how I did the event, how I could select two different pieces, and then determining which button was pushed would actually do that. So um, I'm going to take this opportunity here to work on the annual pay, hourly, biweekly, and monthly. And how I'm going to approach this is I'm going to create a button here, just like we have down here, this Calc button. I want to use a Calc button here and a Calc button there, because depending on if an individual is hourly or salaried, would depend on which one of these get filled in. So if a person attempted to put in an annual pay of, like, say, 70K, and hit calculate, but this is hourly, then I would like to have this all populate, please enter hourly pay, or something along those lines, that it will only calculate the rest of these if this is salaried. And I can do that with a salary, or not a salary, excuse me. I can do that with an if statement, sort of like I did with this stuff here. So let's go ahead and jump into that. First thing we're going to need to do is to come over to our code. And we'll come down here to our operations page. And what we're going to need to do is grab a button. So let's scroll down here to our premium. And I'm going to use a different function for this, just because I have a premium calculation function, and I'll use a wage calculation function. So let's grab a button. Where's this button at? Here's a button. And let's grab this. And then we'll come up here to our hourly. First, we'll put the Calc button on the hourly. And instead of the ID being rec weekend button, let's do wage hourly button. And instead of calculating premium pay, let's just calculate wage. Let's just calculate wage. That'll work. Okay, and then let's copy this again and put it on the annual, which is up here. And the reason I'm doing it this way is because when we think about how individuals are paid, if they're expected to work 40 hours a week, then even if they're hourly, you could figure out their annual pay, obviously. And then if you have, say, a 0.5, then they have to work X number of hours in order to X number of hours per week, and then you can obviously find out the annual pay there. But at least from my experience, the instance is if you have an annual pay set in, and depending on, say, they don't work that full hour, or they may be per diem, or whatnot, as needed, float, something along those lines, then they just simply get paid the wages per hour that they worked. So you really couldn't figure out their annual pay. I mean, you could put something in there, but I would rather have it be the exact amount. And maybe what you could do is like expected or something like that. But I do prefer personally to have the annual pay and the hourly pay based separately, dependent upon salary versus hourly, if that makes any sense. Okay, so we have that. And then what we're going to need also is this ID of pay type. So this pay type is the hourly or the salary. Okay, so we have this and we don't want to, okay, so we already changed this. Yep, calculate wages. So what we need to do is create this function right here. So let's come down and create this function. And what we're going to do is we are going to do the same exact thing as our premium pay. So we'll do it under this section here. You'll see that I created a section here with a comment, calculation functions. So what we're going to need is a function, calc wage event. Now this event essentially is going to be listening to something. So we could have an event dot source to figure out where this is coming from. We can have a target, and then which is what we want to figure out the target, essentially what was pushed. So a source comes in handy if we are thinking of like in an input or something, or even a cell. Like when you have a Google Sheet, you can set a function to be triggered on edit. The problem is it's sheet wide. So anything that changes on that sheet is going to run that function. So you can do an event target, pass the event, whatever you want to call it, and then do a source here instead of target, and then ensure that source is a specific cell. So that's one way to do it. But since we're just having two buttons, we want to just check where that event essentially came from. And to do that, we also need to get the ID of that event. And since we're not dealing with a cell, we're dealing with HTML products or an HTML element within JavaScript. We use this event target ID to get the ID of whatever triggered that event. So let's go ahead and save this into a variable. Let's do just calc wage button clicked, and we'll make that equal to this. So that will be the ID of whatever button was pushed. So now what we need to do is get that wage. Not the wage, but let's come up here and grab the value, because what we're going to need is, actually, let's save this and then I'll repopulate. I'm just saving the file and I'm going to repopulate this so we can see those buttons. It'll help a little bit in the explanation. Okay, so now we have our calc buttons here. And what we're going to base our if statement truly on is two things. Which button was pushed, and we just got the ID for which button was pushed. And then the hourly or the salary, so this pay type. If it's hourly, we want to ensure that this is filled, and then we can calculate this by, adding 20, 80, 26 or whatever, or multiplying, not adding, excuse me. And then if it's annual, we can just break it down, divided by 2080, divided by 26, divided by 12. But it really does all depend on this hourly and salary. So let's go back here to our code and let's grab the ID of that. Down here to our compensation piece, this pay type. Okay, so it's just rec pay type is the select. Okay, so let's grab that and store it into a variable here. Let's say I'm just going to call it the exact same thing. This is going to be document, get element ID, rec pay type, and we want the value of that, whatever's in there. Oops. And then let's go ahead and let's go ahead and get the value of the other two boxes, that annual. So we want this annual and the hourly. So rec hourly and rec annual pay. Okay. And let's throw those into a variable here. So we'll do let rec annual pay, and then we'll do let rec hourly, and then this is going to be equal to our document get element by ID, rec annual pay. We're going to need the value of that, because if it's not filled, then we can also check that. We can just check to see if it's empty or not. Document get, okay, this one, and this is going to be rec hourly dot value. Okay, so now we can think about, and then let's do a error message just like we did here at the bottom. Let wage error message equal something, and we'll have that equal, please enter appropriate wage for now. We'll figure this out. What we can do is use a literal or something to put that in there, but for now that'll work. It'll just give us something. Okay, so now let's write our if statement. So the first thing that we're going to want to do is check to see if the rec pay type is strictly equal to hourly. And then we want to do that. And since we have two items to check, if as long as we work on one, and then the else one will be the other piece. So since we're working on hourly, we can just simply use else for the annual, or we could do else if rec pay type equals salaried, then do something else. And then what we can do it this way, and then just populate this within the if statement, or we can take this if statement here Okay, so that's that. Okay, have too many. There we go. And then what we can do is just right here, else something. And what we can do with this else something is simply show this error message. So let's focus on let's leave it this way, and let's focus on what happens when this rec hourly occurs. So let's go back to our sheet here and walk through it. So if we press this button, and this equals hourly. So what we need to check is two different conditions. If annual pay was pressed and this equals hourly, then we need to essentially say, no, please enter an hourly amount. So coming back here, we have, if you look at this, we have calc button clicked equals rec OT button. And then we broke it down into another if statement. So I'm going to try and do, instead of that, I'm going to add in a and. So what we're looking for is the calc wage button clicked is going to strictly equal our button ID. And that button ID for our annual was to do this rec wage annual button. So if this button was the one that was clicked and the rec pay type is hourly, then we want to do something. So then what we can do is write an error message. Let's figure out where we want that error message. We want that error message. Let's just put the error message in the hourly. And then what we'll do is we'll put the error message in the other one if it's that one. So we'll grab this error one and put this error message in here. So let's grab our rec hourly. And we may need to do something a little bit more to this, but we'll have to get it functional and seeing it. So then what we want is our rec. And remember, we're getting the value of this rec hourly, so we're going to have to do it again. We can't call that variable here because rec hourly is storing that value. Well, actually, you know what we could do? Let's just remove the values on the annual pay for right now. And we can put the hours on down here. So we can do rec hourly dot value equals, please enter in hourly wage. Okay. So that takes care of that. So now let's do another if statement. Let's go else if. And we can copy this because now if it was the annual button and this was salaried, then we can do something else. And that something else is going to be our calculation. So now what we need to do is we need to take our rec annual pay dot value of that, and let's store this into a variable. And let's just call this let an wage equal that. And then we want to set something to, so this hourly, let's do rec hourly dot value is going to equal, and let's do, let's see, annual wage. We can do annual wage divided by 12. So let's actually see how this is going to work here. Let's see if we can get it functional. So let's save it. And then let's come up here and reshare our tab and refresh. Okay, so now let's test out annual pay. Let's do 56K. Let's choose hourly. It should populate something down here. Please enter an hourly rate. Okay, we can trim that up. And now let's do salaried and calculate. And so this is our hourly. Nope, that's not right. this should be our monthly. So we need to grab our monthly and our biweekly. But it calculates, and you'll notice that it calculated all the way out to 66666 forever. So what we need to do is we need to change that. So this isn't going to be our rec hourly. This is going to be our rec monthly. So let's create that variable here. Rec monthly is going to equal document dot. And we also need the biweekly, so let rec biweekly equal this. Okay, perfect. Okay, so now we can actually change this to this is rec monthly. Annual wage is 12. Now what we can do to take care of the decimal thing is we can put this in parentheses and then dot, to fixed, and we'll do 2. So now let's save it and see what we got. We'll come back here. So 2 fixed controls the decimal points and how far you want to take them out. You want 2 decimal places, then you do 2 fixed dot, or dot 2 fixed 2. If you wanted 3, then 3, and so on. So let's come down here to our annual. We'll go 50,000. Let's do hourly. Should populate that thing. And then let's do salaried. And there it is. So that's what this person would make a month before taxes and all that. And yeah, we'll have to figure out how to clear this depending on which. Okay, so now let's do the biweekly. Let's do the biweekly calculation. So rec biweekly dot value is going to equal this and wage divided by 26. And this is based on 40-hour work weeks, obviously. You can modify these is what you need. So now then this rec hourly dot value is going to equal that and wage divided by 2080. And then we'll do a 2 fixed here of 2. Okay, so that should take care of essentially that situation. So that situation is done and over with. So now what we would need is if the rec wage button is salaried. So let's copy this over here. And for this else if, the other situation is going to be wage hourly button. And if the wage hourly button is pressed and the rec pay type is salaried, then what we want to do is we want to, for now, give that little error message. Please enter annual for now. Okay, and then what we can do is grab this, put that there, and instead of this being salaried, let's do hourly. And we're not going to do this. Instead, what we're going to do is this thing. So let's create another variable and let's do hourly wage. That's a D. So the hourly wage is going to equal rec hourly dot value. And then we're going to just copy this over and figure out exactly where this needs to be. So our rec monthly value is not going to be our annual wage, it's going to be our hourly. And it's not going to be times 12. Won't be times 12, so let's get rid of that. Now this is where it's going to get tricky. If you ever run payroll or try to attempt to transfer an hourly wage down, you can get it can get kind of wonky. And the reason why it can get wonky is if you think of a 40-hour work week, well, that would be great. You could do 40 hours per week and then times that by 52 to give yourself an annual, and then find the biweekly and the annual from that. Whatever it is that you do, it is highly advised that you do the same exact thing and you do it consistently. You calculate it consistently. So what I'm actually going to do here, I'm going to find the annual pay of that hourly wage. Now this is only for full-time FTE. So we're going to have to do another logic on that based on those FTEs, which we can get into. But let's first find the hourly. And let's store that hourly annual wage here. Okay. And that is going to be equal to the hourly wage. And what we're going to want to do is times that by 40 based on our work week. Because it's a lot easier to take everything to annual and then drop it down. So if we're going to assume that this individual is working full-time, 40 hours a week, then they can we can go with annual and then take the annual amount and drop it down. Now it's going to get kind of interesting once we start thinking about, like I was mentioning earlier, if you're thinking about per diem or something along those lines, having it built in this way, you could just easily plug in another thing of logic to say, okay, this person is afloat. Don't do it this way, do it this way. So we have hourly wage times 40. That gives us 1 week. And then we can take this whole thing and multiply it by 52 weeks. Encase this in yet another one, another set of parentheses, and do 2 fixed. Do 2 fixed at 2. Okay, so now we have our annual hourly wage. So what we can take now is our rec annual pay, set the value to that. So now that'll take care of the annual. And now we can build off the rest of this to figure out the monthly. So instead of this hourly wage, we want to take this, which stores our annual. And instead of our biweekly, we want to take that, and we don't need our hourly. So now this here should take care of our hourly for a full FTE. So let's save this and make sure our logic here works. And when we're dealing with multiple fields that we're trying to run, Our if statements are going to get somewhat complex, and that's fine because we're checking multiple conditions. And that's the reason why we are using nested if statements. Okay, so here we go. Let's come down here. Let's choose hourly. Say this person makes $52.26. Let's do salaried. Hit calculate. Yep, there it is. So that's good. And then this else thing is just, zero. It's running it. Okay, so let's put 52.36. Now let's do hourly, and it should populate it all. Okay, good. Good. That makes sense. That makes sense. Okay, I haven't run the calculations on this, but it does make sense. Okay, so good. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to end this video here, because what I would like to do in the next video is look at this logic again and figure out the 0.25, the 0.5, the 0.75, and of course we are already working with the 1, as that's the assumption here. And what we can do is simply check. We're checking this, we're checking this, but then we're just going to need to check this field here as well. And if that field is 1, then we got to take the result of that and, obviously nothing. But if it's 0.5, then we have to half it, 0.25, half it. And maybe what we will do is, let's do this now so I don't forget. Just so we'll have it ready. Because I don't know the situation that, each company's in. Of course, I don't know if they have any floats or whatnot. But what we can simply do is float. And then what we can do is come back here and we'll refresh it. And since we dynamically are creating our drop-down boxes, this should easily just pick that up. So our FTE, 0.25, 0.5, 0.75, 1 FTE, and float. So what we'll do is work in this float. I mean, obviously, we're going to assume that it's an FTE, but what we'll do is we will essentially call the float is as needed. So they just, substitute teacher, nurse, whatever, PRN, just whenever they're needed, they're called in and then they work. So that way we can always work on it on the back end, but that's what that float will be. Okay, good. So I'm going to end this video here, and next video we will build in that logic and then do some test runs on a lot of things, and also start working on how to clear these fields once actions occur. Alrighty, so hope this was a helpful video. And if you have any other questions or whatnot, please just shoot me an email. The email's inside the descriptions, and I'll get back to you. If you have an idea for, a video that you would like to see me do, like maybe HTML, CSS, what have you, also shoot me an email and I'll be happy to put that together. And until next time, please take care.